staring at a 400-point move. That's what the implied open for the Nifty seems to be indicating right now. Let me now welcome on board Sandip Sabharwal as well and figure out what are his thoughts on the markets. Sandeep, hi, good morning. Lot of news to react to, but first let's talk about India and finally a ceasefire has been reached with Pakistan. Do you think a big reprieve for the markets today?
Yes, I think it's a big reprieve, and what we are seeing is that there seems to be positive news flow not only on the Indian borders but also from some constructive comments on US-China trade talks, on potential talks starting between Ukraine and Russia. So I think from a very negative environment, we seem to be moving to a more constructive, positive environment in a very rapid speed. So I think as things play out globally, it could have a positive impact on risky assets, mostly equities, etc., and could create some sort of corrections in gold and other safe haven assets.
All right, Sandeep, but also today we have a big news coming in on pharma. So help us with your understanding on this one, because Donald Trump is actually considering slashing the drug prices and especially the prescription drug prices by 30 to 80%. A sentimental impact is likely, but fundamentally, how does it change the story of the Indian pharma sector, Sandeep? Your thoughts?
I think we'll need to see the construct of the guidelines, whatever they are proposing, and how they actually get implemented. So immediately there could be obviously some impact sentimentally, but how these pharma companies challenge these guidelines, and so I think it will be a long drawn affair. But that said, I think the proposal aims to keep US prescription drug prices similar to that of what the same companies are selling in other countries, and the lowest of that should be followed in the US, etc. So, so I think it could have an impact on the larger drug development companies, the MNCs who actually develop the drugs, because it's there where the margin hit will be more. For generics, the hit is somewhat complicated because on one hand, you'll have a scenario where since the prescription drug prices themselves fall, uh, the demand for generics could reduce somewhat. And to that extent, if that happens over a period of time, then it could impact the business of some of the Indian pharma exporters.
So, Sandeep, what would you do if there was a decline in pharma? Would you buy that today selectively?
Not today, because the key is right now to look at more inward sectors and watch out how the developments play out, because we haven't even had the announcement. So once the contours of what they are proposing comes out, then we can have a more considered view. Right now, it's in the realm of speculation.
Yeah, it sure is. Let's wait for those nitty gritties. But Sandeep, let's talk about cap goods, defense. That's where you saw meaningful move. Of course, it was a sentimental move, perhaps because of what was happening at the LOC. But do you think these companies are good to hold in your core portfolio, even at these levels?
Yes, I think so, because what will happen is that because of these incidents, some of the defense projects which were proceeding at a pace, let's say, to be executed over 5 years might be pushed to be finished over 3 years, etc. So I think the execution cycle, although it's tough to do in defense products to cut down the time cycle substantially, but still we could have cycles which get cut down, more orders getting placed as uh, the government re-evaluates the quantity and availability of various defense products due to what happened over the last 4 5 days. So I think for sure demand uptick should be there.
What's your preferred list, Sandeep, within defense?
So I think largely the credible players are the pure defense players. Obviously, are in the public sector largely. There are some private sector companies, etc., but mostly companies like BEL, Bharat Dynamics, HAL, even the shipyard companies. I think all of them will have positive tailwinds because of what's happened in the recent past. And then there are companies where defense is a part of the business, but not the major component on the private side. Among the larger companies like Bharat Forge or L&T or some other companies which I immediately are not coming to mind. So I think all of these companies incrementally obviously tend to gain because of all of this.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Sandeep, stay with us. We're looking at a 2% of a gap up move. That's what the pre open rate itself is suggesting, 24,450 plus levels. We'll continue as one of those stocks which has sort of languished as well as opposed to its other peers, right? For quite a few months now. Do you think one can still buy around these 720 levels?
Yeah, so on Tata Motors, and the news flow fundamentally around whatever numbers they've been reporting has been muted. But the US UK trade deal obviously is positive for them because it puts them into a separate category vis-a-vis the rest of the world. So how the contours of the other trade deals will play out, we have to see. And then there's also the news of the split of the company. So I think there are multiple news flows coming in which incrementally are positive. And to that extent, I think given the fact that it's beaten down so much, the stock should continue in a positive trend.
All right, so that's the
Sandeep, I just want to spend a minute on this whole defense, the counter view. The counter view, Sandeep, could be that look, drones were used, planes were hardly used. BL, HAL, they are in the manufacturing of planes and other high-tech equipment, defense products. Do you think structurally we must understand that the defense requirement of any country is changing and we need to align with the new defense companies rather than the traditional ones, Sandeep?
Not really. I don't think so because I think eventually the biggest deterrence remains your air force. And what this proves more than anything else is that the requirement to invest faster in air capabilities is much greater, as well as all the supersonic missiles, etc., is much greater. Obviously, drones have been shown to be the initial movers. So I think you can send in any amount of drones which you want, but eventually that will not uh, lead to the defeat of the enemy and the maximum damage, as per whatever reports we have read also, have actually come from the missiles which were sent in through the aircraft rather than the drones. So I think there'll be demand all across. Obviously, the demand for drones is much greater because they are sent in much bigger quantities. So I think across the board, there will be demand increase just because of preparedness need, the fact that countries will need to be more prepared.
Okay. 2 minutes to go. And by the way, messages come from Jake's. Love the reaction. Okay. Zen Technologies is up, Circuit up. Now, what does this company do? They essentially are in drone jammers. So, Sandeep, which now becomes more like a defense stock, which you could say could be 5% of your portfolio, like a structural story. Like L&T is a structural story. HDFC Bank a couple of years ago was a structural portfolio stock. Is there a defense stock or two defense stocks which you would say I would put 5 to 8% of my portfolio?
I think what immediately comes to mind is Bharat Electronics. I think that's the most credible player. See, many of these private sector companies are there, but it's very tough to evaluate these companies. We largely need to go by what the management say. But on the public side, we clearly know what these companies are doing. So I think among the if one has to pick a large established defense company, I think Bharat Electronics will be my preferred bet. And we will also see the shipyard companies, HAL, etc. do well.
Okay, 1 minute to go, and this is where we stand. Sandip Sabharwal, always fantastic to have you on ET Now. Thank you for joining us. Aditya, I'm just going to come back right to you for a stock.
If you like this video, then like, share and subscribe to ET Now.